Well, it looks like I'll be moving on to the championship in one of my dynasty leagues and a couple of the redraft leagues, and probably need some other wacky things to happen, much like y'all do tonight, such as Tucker Kraft going off for like 25 points, Romeo Dobbs doing well, Josh Jacobs getting between 14 and 26 fantasy points tonight for me to move on in big money tournaments. But for those of you who have already moved on, congratulations, and let's go through Week 17's top 30 wide receiver rankings. So make sure to go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support, because I'm doing everything I can to get us ready for our fantasy championship week. So getting into our first tier, I've got Jamar Chase at number 1 and Justin Jefferson at number 2. Listen, with Jamar Chase, obviously he would kind of normally be in like a tier by himself. This week he gets the Denver Broncos. Now, I have pointed this out about Pat Surtain, the Denver Broncos' number 1 corner, and probably the best corner on the planet right now. He has not particularly been traveling with every single team's number 1. And just about a month ago, he was not following Jerry Jeudy for his massive 200-plus yard game against them. I kind of have trouble believing that he will not be following. It'll be best on best in probably the world right now between Jamar Chase and Pat Surtain. So I kind of do believe that Jamar Chase will get some Pat Surtain. So that just kind of moves up Justin Jefferson to number 2, because Justin Jefferson obviously went nuclear, had his best game of the fantasy year versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now he gets the Green Bay Packers, very high upside matchup. A lot of the line for both teams right here. Minnesota keeps their number 1 hopes alive, and Green Bay is obviously trying to lock up the number 6 seed in all likelihood as well. So this is a very high octane matchup with two explosive offenses. I see Justin Jefferson having another good day, and again, getting up into that same tier as Jamar Chase this week. At number 3, I've got Puka Nacua versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this matchup here, I do think is particularly good. The Carolina Panthers just absolutely thwarted the Arizona Cardinals defense. They're starting to break down, and Puka Nacua had his probably worst game in fantasy since he really came back from the injury, but Puka Nacua is still that number 1, and it's so clear at this point because Cooper Kupp is really nowhere to be found. So if everything hits well, I think Puka Nacua is inside of tier 1. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Brian Thomas Jr. at number 4 and Amon-Ra St. Brown at number 5. I'm not looking to fight anymore on Brian Thomas Jr. I was wrong, and you guys were right. I was just really not on board with the whole Mac Jones thing, but again, 4 last games, he's been absolutely fantastic. Now he gets the Tennessee Titans. The matchup should theoretically be really beatable here. Brian Thomas Jr. just is honestly kind of becoming the best wide receiver in this 2024 draft class. Like, it really has been him this year. So Brian Thomas Jr., as far as I'm concerned, the guy belongs in tier 2 as of right now. And Amon-Ra St. Brown at the San Francisco 49ers. This is our Monday night game. The Lions are obviously going to crush the 49ers here. And Amon-Ra St. Brown went back down to earth a little bit in week 16. Had a decent game, got back in the end zone. He's had a lot of touchdowns this year. So that obviously, you know, puts him in a position to where I feel really comfortable having him inside of tier 2, because at this point I do feel like his floor is kind of stabilized out to a pretty safe level, and we all know that ceiling is really big. And Nico Collins here at number 6 versus the Baltimore Ravens. Now, over the last several weeks, I've really had Nico Collins inside of tier 1, or at the very least at the top of tier 2 in most weeks since he came back from the injury. I think I had him overranked, but now it feels right. Obviously, if you did not see, Tank Dell went down with a pretty bad knee injury on Saturday versus the Kansas City Chiefs. That knee was definitely pointed the wrong way. It was a gruesome injury. He's not coming back, obviously. And Nico Collins obviously is already without Stephon Diggs, and John Mechie is injured as well. Like, he is so clearly the number 1, and this is a definitely beatable pass defense right here. So Nico Collins, I just think still belongs inside of tier 2. I think I've got him more accurately ranked this time around as well. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Mike Evans at number 7 and Devontae Adams at number 8. So with Mike, obviously he's kind of, you know, always been boom or bust. But even like on Sunday night against the Dallas Cowboys, he didn't bust per se, but he obviously didn't have as great of a week as he did in week 15. Versus Carolina, this matchup should be very beatable. And honestly, I think this is a really good matchup for Carolina, for Mike Evans, because I think Carolina will put up points against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Carolina's a real team right now. So I think that keeps Mike Evans and the Bucks on the wheel right here. And Mike Evans hits a big ceiling game. And then Devontae Adams here as well. The guy is so clearly Aaron Rodgers number one. It's not even worth fighting about at this point. He is so clearly Aaron Rodgers' preferred target. He gets the Buffalo Bills, who obviously that's not a fantastic matchup. But Devontae Adams at this point is so clearly getting like 12 to 13 targets per game. And the guy has a massive ceiling with a really, really stable floor. Terry McLaurin at number 9 and CeeDee Lamb at 10 to round out this tier. Listen, Terry McLaurin comes back and plays pretty well against the Philadelphia Eagles. Puts up a touchdown. The guy has 12 touchdowns on the year now. And I've been discussing this for weeks now. This guy is so consistent with Jaden Daniels. Like, they have such a great connection in Jaden Daniels' first year in the NFL. It's actually pretty absurd. Terry McLaurin has become really efficient on a per target basis. Efficiency levels that you see with like elite wide receivers. Terry McLaurin has been very, very good. Versus Atlanta here, the matchup is obviously fantastic. Terry McLaurin absolutely inside the top 10. And CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb obviously has been really good. And he played a really good game, like NFL-wise, against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Did not get in the end zone, so obviously his fantasy production was a little mediocre. But CeeDee Lamb, the really big thing I'm worried about here is he's been dealing with a shoulder injury for a while, but he really grimaced a lot on that Sunday night game. And he came back in after he really hurt it, but then he didn't come back for maybe 2 more plays I saw him on. Basically all of the second half. Like, he was really out of that second half quite a bit. So we're going to have to monitor this one at the Philadelphia Eagles. Matchup doesn't really matter for CeeDee Lamb particularly. They're going to find a way to get him the ball. So if he plays, he's still a top 10 guy. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got T. Higgins at 11 and Jackson Smith-Njigba at 12. So with T. Higgins here versus Denver, he may be the primary beneficiary of this matchup, I think. Because like I said, if things go as I predict they will, Pat Surtain likely will be following around Jamar Chase, which means that T. Higgins is going to get plenty of good opportunities as well. Now, I don't really believe that Jamar Chase will be in a situation where he'll be singled up with Pat Surtain a bunch. I bet they'll have safety help rolled over there quite a bit. So I think T. Higgins could be a really good beneficiary in this matchup right here. And obviously the guy is basically averaging 14 to 15 fantasy points, half PPR. The guy needs to go in your lineup. And Jackson Smith-Njigba needs to go in as well. This guy has been awesome over the last 2 months, basically. He is clearly the wide receiver 1 in Seattle. He's taken on the Chicago Bears, who have really taken a fall off the cliff as a defense in the latter part of the year. They're ready to take a vacation. I've been saying this for weeks now. This team is ready to go to the Bahamas. So Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think they're still fighting for playoff seeding right here. Jackson Smith-Njigba goes inside the top 12. And A.J. Brown at 13 and Keenan Allen at 14. So A.J. Brown versus Dallas. Obviously, this ranking right here is going to be if Jalen Hurts plays. If Jalen Hurts plays, I think it'll be a really good play against the Dallas Cowboys, who are definitely beatable through the air. Now, the problem, obviously, is that Jalen Hurts went down with a concussion. He tried to play it off like it didn't happen, but they didn't let him come back in the game. So if it's Kenny Pickett, I don't think that his ceiling is much higher than this. I do think that he'd drop a little bit if it was Kenny Pickett, but I will say, Kenny Pickett definitely force-fed him the ball. He wasn't nearly as efficient getting it to him, but he definitely force-fed it to him quite a few times. So A.J. Brown, if it's Kenny Pickett, he probably drops down to a little above 20, something like that. But right now, I'm going to say that Jalen Hurts plays, and Jalen Hurts plays. I'll put A.J. Brown here at 13. And Keenan Allen at 14 versus the Seattle Seahawks right here. Look, Keenan Allen has really been coming through. I mean, the guy is kind of having a Devontae Adams type of end of season right here, where he's kind of becoming the clear number 1 target in Chicago, and he's becoming, he's always been a quarterback's best friend because of his route running, but he's also getting in the end zone as well. So I think that there's a lot of red zone targets that go to Keenan Allen, and I think that he's just really vibing the best with Caleb Williams right now. I've got him here at 14 because his floor and his ceiling have kind of been combined to become really high, both of them. On Christmas Day, we get a gift from Underdog because Patrick Mahomes' projection this week is 0.5 total yards. Obviously, it's set up in a way for you to basically win free money when you hit the higher on this one. So if you have not taken advantage of Underdog yet, and you want to get in on this Christmas Day sweat-free pick for Pat Mahomes this week, go down in the comments below and grab the link that's there, and use code FFN to sign up for Underdog. They will match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 when you hit the higher on the sweat-free pick for Mahomes this week. Now, getting into our next tier right here, I've got Ladd McConkey at 15 and Malik Neighbors at 16. So obviously with Ladd McConkey and Malik Neighbors, I think they both just kind of have a really safe floor at this point. Malik Neighbors definitely does not have the upside that, Ladd McConkey has, I don't think, because of just the quarterback deficiencies. The New York Giants are literally the worst team. They're barely an NFL team. Like, honestly, I don't know how, there's always the discussion of, can a college team beat this team? I think that a college team might be able to beat the Giants. They're just putrid right now. So his upside just can't go much higher than this. But with Ladd at the New England Patriots, I think his upside is definitely there. His floors become really safe as well. So Ladd McConkey, I do feel pretty solid about this week. And Malik Neighbors, again, I think his floor is just really safe at this point. But his upside is definitely week to week. The Colts matchup could be beatable, but I'm not really putting much behind it. Jordan Addison at 17 and Garrett Wilson at 18. So Jordan Addison, his floor has kind of become really safe, ironed out to a safe level. He obviously had the touchdown that kind of saved his week in a way. It wouldn't have been a bust week necessarily, but I will say that, I do think that there is a possibility that Jordan Addison goes off in this game versus Green Bay, but I also don't know if I would say that his floor is super, super safe at this point. I do think it's much safer than it was, obviously, 2 months ago, and that's why I've got confidence in here at number 17, because the matchup upside is so high. And then with Garrett Wilson at Buffalo, listen, he's so clearly the number 2 option in this New York Jets offense, and I do think that this matchup is fine, but Garrett Wilson at this point, it's not even arguable at this point. Davante Adams is the preferred number 1. So he's getting out-targeted on a weekly basis. He's a really good player, so when he gets his, he makes it happen. But that doesn't put his ceiling much higher than this. I think his floor is really at this point what I'm ranking him based off of. Dropping down to our next tier. Courtland Sutton at 19 and George Pickens at 20. So Courtland Sutton has kind of taken a little bit of a fall start of the fantasy football playoffs. He definitely has not been hitting the ceiling. He's had some weeks where he's had his week saved by a touchdown, but a lot of times it's been a little disappointing with Courtland Sutton. So at the Cincinnati Bengals, the matchup is pretty sweet, but at the same time, when I look at him, I just don't think that we're going to get necessarily a massive ceiling game again, because they've really been trying to run the ball a little bit more and kind of iron out the run game to make them ready for the playoffs. So I don't know if that's going to be this game again, but Courtland Sutton is still definitely the number 1 with upside to a certain point. And George Pickens versus Kansas City on Christmas Day, obviously he's going to be questionable. The guy was an estimated participant limited in practice on Sunday. We'll see what the practice report is on Monday. By the time you're watching this, you might already know. But George Pickens, obviously, they need him so bad in Pittsburgh. He definitely has upside with Russell Wilson. It's been easily the best target by far for Russell Wilson in this offense. They cannot move the ball without him. They need him so badly. So George Pickens, if he plays, ultimately, I do think he's a pretty high ceiling play, but at the same time, with a relatively stable floor. And Zay Flowers versus the Houston Texans on Christmas Day as well. Also, will be coming into the game questionable. Apparently, he was a DNP, I think it was, or limited on Sunday's estimated practice report. Zay had a pretty good day NFL-wise, but obviously the ceiling is still not being hit. So at this point, I have to rank him basically in line with these other 2 Atlanta Falcons receivers, Drake London and Darnell Mooney. So as far as I'm concerned with Michael Penix, he looked awesome. I think he looked really good for his first NFL start late into the year. Now, I just got done saying I don't think the Giants are a legitimate NFL team right now. So it's really hard for me to go out on a limb and say, yes, I feel great about Michael Penix. I think the real test is against Washington. Now, Drake London left the game early with a hamstring injury. He did not return, but apparently, according to Raheem Morris, the head coach, he said he thinks he could have come back. But he ended up holding him out because that game was obviously so well in hand that they didn't want to risk him in advance for the Sunday night matchup versus the Washington Commanders. So obviously we're going to need to monitor this one throughout the week. I think Drake London and Darnell Mooney are still basically the same level of plays. They both are going to get Darnell Mooney might get out-targeted by a little bit, but Mooney's upside as far as his efficiency has been better than Drake London. So I think they're both still in basically the same place for me. They have not separated from each other yet, and maybe it will happen against the Commanders, but right now I'm putting them at 22 and 23 back-to-back. Dropping down to our next tier, DJ Moore at 24 and Adam Thielen at 25. So DJ Moore has kind of become this, consistently hitting his floor, and again, I've highlighted this ever since they had the switch from offensive coordinator from Shane Waldron to over now their interim head coach. DJ Moore has been pretty solid in fantasy football ever since that switch happened. But the past 3 weeks, 7.9 fantasy points, 11 and 10.5 and a half PPR format. Now, again, it's sort of Garrett Wilson-esque, where over that time he's gotten 8 targets, 10 targets. Again, reminds me of Garrett Wilson / Drake London, where it's like he's definitely still seeing the importance of the offense, and they're drawing up plays for him. But I don't think that he has the most chemistry with Caleb. I think that belongs to Keenan Allen. So at this point, I don't know if I'd see DJ Moore hitting the ceiling anymore. And then with Adam Thielen at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if Bryce Young can play that way again, like, that guy is providing serious fantasy upside. Adam Thielen gets in the end zone against the Arizona Cardinals and ends up having a pretty solid game with that end zone touchdown. But at the same time, Adam Thielen is definitely getting that target share that a wide receiver one needs. The last 4 games, 10, 11, 7, and 6 targets. So, his floor is not super high because obviously Bryce Young can go in the tank and so can Adam Thielen as well. But at the same time, I think his ceiling is basically between like 15 and 19 fantasy points. Will he hit it this week? I think it's very, very possible against the Tampa Bay Bucs, but his ceiling is just not high enough for me to rank him much higher than this. Jaden Reed at 26 and Jameson Williams at 27. Now, Jaden Reed at the Minnesota Vikings. If you remember, the first time the Green Bay Packers played the Minnesota Vikings this year, Jaden Reed went off. He went off. He was absolutely fantastic in that game. So maybe I'm just a little bit reminiscent and I'm nostalgic that way, but I think Jaden Reed can hit a big ceiling game. Obviously, the floor is really low. We don't know what the output has been from the New Orleans game on Monday night yet. This is being filmed before then. So he may end up having a bad game on the Monday night game. But Jaden Reed, again, this is just going to be a more competitive game versus the Minnesota Vikings where both offenses can put up big points in fantasy football. I ultimately just want options attached to this matchup, and Jaden Reed is included. Jameson Williams at 27 at the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, people might object to this ranking because it's, he hit a ceiling game. He hit a ceiling game versus the Chicago Bears. Jameson Williams looked fantastic. But the reality is that with Jameson Williams, there still is definitely a little bit of an issue here where it's like he doesn't really see more than like 7 or 8 targets. So his floor is kind of ironed out to a pretty safe level here. But I don't know if I see him hitting his ceiling in this game. The 49ers, I think they're going to end up pretty much crushing them. And I don't know if he'll be needed super much. And again, it just kind of goes to show this offense, it has so many weapons that not everyone is going to eat on a consistent basis in this offense. So I do think that Jameson Williams is definitely still someone that you need to put in your lineup as like a flex option. But I don't know if I consider him like a high-end wide receiver too. Dropping down to our last tier right here. Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp. Our 2 guys who are looking like they're going to ride off into the sunset together. Man, it's been a fall from grace, man. Tyreek Hill had a couple flashes in the pan several weeks ago, but the past 2 weeks, 4.6 and 10.4 fantasy points. And this game against San Francisco in Week 16, he had a week-saving touchdown, had 7 targets, but he only had 3 catches for 29 yards. It's just, I think that the injury has definitely affected Tyreek Hill, and at the same time, against the Cleveland Browns, the matchup isn't bad, but this guy has had so many opportunities against good matchups throughout the entire year, and it just hasn't happened very much. So at this point, I just think Miami's season is pretty much cooked, and I don't think that Tyreek Hill has just been showing much upside lately. Cooper Kupp, it's so weird. Versus Arizona, he has back-to-back games where he had 3 targets. It's so clear that Puka is the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and Cooper Kupp at this point is an afterthought. That's really what it comes down to. So versus Arizona here, I do think that there's absolutely upside for Cooper Kupp to hit this ceiling, but at the same time, like, the floor has been leveled out to such a low level that I really don't think I can put Cooper Kupp much higher than this in good conscience. This guy is killing people in the fantasy playoffs. I like to stay away from guys like that. And Cooper Kupp has been exactly that. And DK Metcalf to round us out at 30 at the Chicago Bears. DK Metcalf, it was sort of similar to watching Deebo Samuel. So DK Metcalf obviously has the best game that he's had in basically, since he came back from the injury. And it still wasn't that great. He gets in the end zone. It was similar to Tyreek Hill. 7 targets, 3 catches for 57 yards, and a touchdown. Like, it's been saved by a touchdown here. And that was his first touchdown since week 7. It just doesn't... DK Metcalf is just not hitting the ceiling. So at this point, it's really just kind of like an upside play at this point. Like, does he get in the end zone one time? But even then, the upside is not super high. It's like, can he hit a solid floor of like 15 fantasy points in a full PPR format? It's possible against the Chicago Bears because the matchup is strong, but I don't really look at this as some opportunistic move that you need to take advantage of moving forward, like a Deebo Samuel. I think they're both still are what they are, and what they are is injured and just clearly becoming out of favor in this offense as far as the number one option goes. So let me know how your team did in week 16, and if you want to see the first edition of the top 12 defense rankings in week 17, click on this video right here.